Welcome, fellow horror hounds, and welcome to the latest episode of Talk and Stalk, your unholy home for horror. I'm your host, as always, Barry, and I'm joined today by my corrupted co-host, the diabolical Darren.
Hiya, happy to be here, and just looking forward now to talking about one of my childhood favourite films.
And the movie that we're going to be talking about today is 1981's An American Werewolf in London. Now, this is a film I do have a soft spot for. I do believe this may actually be the first horror film I ever saw. I was probably around 5 or 6 years old, and I literally only remember one scene from this film. We are going to talk about this scene later, and that is the werewolf transformation scene that actually traumatised the hell out of me as a kid. I just remember, I'm pretty certain it was my mum or dad that rented this film. God knows why I was there watching it. But I just remember that transformation scene, and as I said, it just absolutely terrified me.
Yeah, it's a great scene, that is. With me, the first time I saw this film was back on VHS, obviously when it was released back in, say, 81. And then, from what I remember, it had like kind of a quick turnover to TV.
Okay.
Because I'm sure it was on the BBC back in, say, 82. Yeah. And then it became a regular sort of staple of my diet then, of watching. Yeah. And, I just fell in love with the film from then on.
Well, this film was both a critical and a commercial success. I think John Landis, obviously directed by John Landis, who was most renowned for comedy. I believe his directorial debut was a film called Schlock. But obviously he directed The Blues Brothers in 1980, National Lampoons. But I think he actually wrote the draft of the screenplay for this in 1969. It was basically shelved for over a decade. I believe the financiers of the film had actually said that they thought the script was actually not scary enough to be a horror and not funny enough to be a comedy.
That's right, yeah. Like you say, I think he was working on the set of Kelly's Heroes.
He was
kind of a gopher. Yeah. And during that time, he witnessed like an unusual sort of burial ritual in Yugoslavia where the film was being shot.
Yeah.
And it basically gave him the idea for this.
Yeah, that's right. I believe there were some gypsies who performing rituals on a man who was buried so he would not rise from the grave, weren't it? And
that's right.
I think Landis kind of realised that, the ability to confront the undead, it gave him the idea for the movie. And this is an 80s horror film, much like Fright Night, just 4 years later, kind of taking it back to old school horror.
Yes,
an
exactly,
80s contemporary horror film, but giving us, let's quickly jump into it. Now, this film is also quite notable, actually, for being the first ever Oscar winner for the best makeup. Now, in 1980, we had David Lynch's Elephant Man, which was, a great movie, but it was a film that the Oscar category for best makeup was introduced after that, because it was believed that film did not get recognition for the fantastic makeup effects.
That's right,
and so it was a new category for 1981 for best makeup, and Rick Baker is the first ever winner of that Oscar for this movie. And 1981 was a pretty busy year for werewolf films, wasn't it? We also had The Howling and we also had Wolfen that all came out in the same year.
Yeah, and funny enough, Rick Baker wasn't going to do the film at first. They talked about it 11 years previous when he was working with him on Schlock, and he had agreed to do The Howling. So it's quite a famous story. Is that then John Landis phoned him up, asked him to do the film, and then he asked his protege Rob Bottin to do The Howling, and then the rest is history.
Yeah, and of course, as you said, Rob Bottin, The Howling, and of course did tremendous practical effects the following year for The Thing, directed by John Carpenter. So, with this film, we obviously, Rick Baker, fantastic, doesn't really need any introduction whatsoever. I mean, the practical effects in this movie are just fantastic. They're just top notch. It stars David Norton, who was actually, I didn't know this until quite recently actually, was used for Dr. Pepper commercials. Rick Baker actually noticed him from these Dr. Pepper commercials and cast him.
Yeah, that's right. That's quite strange because he didn't really have any acting sort of ability or experience. So that was quite a strange one, but I think the fact that he really liked his personality.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, they dropped him, didn't they? They dropped him after the movie because of the nudity, the nude scenes.
That's right, yeah.
Dr. Pepper, yeah, they actually dropped him from their future commercials because of the nude scenes. And him and Griffin Dunne, from what I understand, they basically got thrown together very quickly and really hit it off. They had a lot in common. I think they both grew up or lived in Connecticut or something. And they got on really well and became very good friends, didn't they, through this film?
Yeah, that's right. I think Griffin Dunne actually was the one that was actually cast. I think he went to a casting session at like 200 people.
Yeah.
And he apparently, John Landis seen him and really liked him. He didn't even ask him to read any lines at first. Then he gave him a phone call. John Landis phoned him up and said, are you claustrophobic? And Griffin Dunne said no. And again, then he said, well, you're hired then,
Yeah.
You're on the film.
Yeah, and I just want to say the opening to this film I love. It's notable, every song in this film has Moon in the title. And I just love the opening. The opening we get what's, believed to be the Moors. But obviously they were actually, it was actually in Wales, wasn't it, where it was actually filmed. And the place of East Proctor was actually a tiny little village called Crickedarn.
That's right, yeah.
And I believe, because obviously they go to the pub, the Slaughtered Lamb, and I think the interior scenes were actually filmed in the Black Swan, Old Lane in Surrey.
I think they the actual 5-pointed star and all that was actually put on there.
Yeah.
For the sake of the film. But apart from that, the actual, look of the pub was still pretty much as you see it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they were filming in Wales, but it very much, you can fully believe that was, the North, the Yorkshire North. Yeah. You could fully believe it. It was a great location. They made great use of that location. And the Slaughtered Lamb, that experience when they first walk in there, I mean, I love what Griffin Dunne says. He sees the Slaughtered Lamb sign, and he actually says, what kind of ad is that for a pub? That was actually improv. Actually, even when they say goodbye to the sheep, that was improv as well. That wasn't actually in the script. So when they walk into that pub, and I'm pretty certain a lot of people out there listening have probably had this experience. You've been out in the middle of nowhere, you're in a village you've never been to, you walk into the pub and everyone's head turns. Everyone looks at you like you've just set foot off a UFO.
Oh, yeah. And me being from Wales, if I ever turned up, sometimes I go and see, a concert or football in England, London or something, and it's like you're off the end of a planet, come from a different planet.
Yeah.
As soon as you open your mouth.
I make the joke a lot whenever I've been to, which isn't a huge amount, whenever I've been into a pub that I've never set foot in before, usually in a small village, a small place and that, and I always feel like it's the Slaughtered Lamb. I'm just walking into the Slaughtered Lamb. And in the Slaughtered Lamb, we'll quickly say as well, Brian Glover, of course, who went on to star alongside someone else in that pub, Rick Mayall, of course, big British comedy star, most famous for the likes of The Young Ones and Bottom. He's actually one of the guys playing chess, isn't he? Yeah,
and actually, John Landis actually found Brian Glover. I think the lady who works behind the bar as well is Lilas. Can't remember the second name. But he actually found all these, David Schofield, from a play, Nicholas Nickleby.
Okay.
Which he saw in London, and he thought, I really want to have these for the film. And because it was some kind of British scheme, the film had to have so many British people in it for it to fulfill a scheme.
Yeah.
And most of the cast and crew were British, obviously.
Yeah, and that's what I love about the film, actually. I love that British setting. It's an American-made movie. It's made by an American Rick Baker, and it's a Universal movie in that as well. But the British location, the British locale, it's kind of like the Slaughtered Lamb could be any pub that you walk into in any village anywhere in the UK.
Yeah, and that's what makes the film work, because it's so realistic.
Yeah, and it isn't long before we get that Lon Chaney, the Wolfman reference when they're in there. And I love that, the fact that we get like the granddaddy of werewolf films mentioned, 41's Wolfman. Bela Lugosi and obviously Lon Chaney Jr. And I like the scene, obviously, where Griffin Dunne, doesn't he? He says, what's that pointed star on the wall for?
That's right, yeah, and they all look at him as if he's from another planet, it's so funny in that scene where the guy says, "You made me miss,"
Yes.
and he's excellent in that
I've
role.
never missed that board.
That's right.
Yeah. And obviously, yeah, get into the music, because obviously, like I said, every song in this film has Moon in the title. I love the opening. Bobby Vinton's a very kind of slow, soothing version of Blue Moon.
Yeah.
We of course get Moon Dance later by Van Morrison, and I believe that's a beautiful song. Actually, it plays during the lovemaking scene.
That's right. Yeah.
And again, I think they had filming that scene as well. They had problems with the shower. It was regulating the water temperature. They had a real job actually doing that.
Oh, okay.
And Creedence Clearwater Revival's "Bad Moon Rising."
That's
that obviously plays near the moment of him changing to the werewolf.
Yes.
Just fantastic. And of course, there were other versions. Now, I know that Cat Stevens wouldn't actually allow his Moon Shadow song, I believe it was, because he'd actually taken up Islam. He'd found Islam, and he didn't want his song to be attributed to an R-rated movie.
That's right, and the same happened with Bob Dylan as well. He'd done a version of Blue Moon, and again, he refused to let them use it.
Yeah, and of course, yeah, with Bob Dylan, obviously, he'd found Christianity as well, and I think the fact that their music was going to be attached to a horror movie that was a deterrent for him. But and Elvis Presley as well, I believe they couldn't acquire the rights due to like the ongoing lawsuit that was going on with his estate at the time. But the songs that get used in this movie are just fantastic. And it's got to be said about this as well, that her name is actually escaping me. Jenny Agatha, is it?
Jenny Agatha, yeah.
Jenny Agatha. I believe that David Norton actually had a big crush on her, from what I read. He really she was kind of like his. Yeah, I think a lot of people did. She actually went on to star in Child's Play 2, didn't she, in 1990?
That's right. Yeah, I forgot about that actually. And
she was actually the adopted mother. So yeah, this is film. I mean, at its core, An American Werewolf in London. It's a horror movie, certainly, but it does have humour in there. It's a film. There's a lot of humour in there, but it's not slapstick humour. It's not a film that's bashing you across the head with it, is it?
No, and for me, this is probably the best horror stroke comedy ever made. It's up there with the likes of, something similar in terms of, horror comedy, I would say, is Return of the Living Dead from 1985.
Yeah.
But I would put this as the best, because everything just works perfectly. And some people back in the day didn't even get it. Didn't get the, comedy and all that. But it's such a blend. It just works so well. And like you say, with the same track, it's just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, so the opening scene, obviously, we know that, we hear a howl, and they get told, don't they? They get told a couple of times to stick to the road, stay off the moors. And obviously, they go off the trail, you hear the big wolf. Now, actually, the wolf howl, I believe, was 8 or 9 different animal noises actually combined together.
Yeah, wasn't there like an elephant in there as well?
Yeah, they wanted to create, some kind of otherworldly monster sound. And, speaking of the werewolf itself, because kind of a less is more approach is taken, until the transformation scene, which, again, in itself is quite, this is a film that's 97 minutes long. The transformation doesn't happen until almost the hour mark of the movie.
That's right, yeah. And I think John Landis actually gone on record as saying he thinks towards the end of the film, the actual werewolf is shown too much. But for me, I thought it was perfectly done. I thought we'd seen a lot of it towards the end, but to me, it doesn't look hokey or anything.
No, and I think this is one of them rare films as well, actually, where I believe this film was actually filmed in sequence as well. Every scene was actually filmed in order, which really doesn't happen too often.
I think the only scene that wasn't filmed in order was when they filmed the mock-up porno film, which we'll get on to later. I think that was done 3 weeks before.
Oh, see you next Wednesday.
Photography. Yeah. We will come on to that.
The transformation scene, I believe, actually took 6 days to complete, and they were working like 10 hours a day. I think there was like 3 hours on set, 3 hours of just makeup removal and that. And, John Landis was so confident with Rick Baker's effects, that he wanted all of the effects to be shown. This transformation scene, unlike The Howling, The Howling's was very good, certainly, but it was in the dark. He wanted to show this in all its glory in this very brightly lit scene.
I think the actual scene itself is probably one of the best you'll ever see for the time, and it's still, I don't know about yourself, but it still holds up today.
I still think, I still firmly believe it probably is the greatest werewolf transformation scene we've had.
Yeah, I would put it over The Howling, and a lot of people, depend from where you come from, because I find a lot of my American friends prefer The Howling transformation and the actual film, which I find astounding, because as much as I love The Howling, and I really do, it's not on a par in terms of film or transformation scene as this film. It really isn't.
I think, with this movie, what John Landis wanted to do, John Landis actually wanted to show us just how painful, how excruciating, how visceral a transformation would be. Gone were the days of just literally person growing hair, literally in 2 or 3 frames have transformed. We were going to actually see a full transformation. And, Rick Baker's effects combined with David Norton's performance, you can really feel it.
Yeah. It's just, I think Norton, like everything he'd done for the film, he ended up in a hole in the floor, I think, for like 6-8 hours during the one scene of the transformation. And I think he took it on board so well, being in all this makeup and all that. It was like a really pleasurable experience and that. But I think Griffin Dunne had the absolute opposite experience, where he hated the makeup and he hated, being sort of put out. He said, he looked in the mirror and he said, I could see my own death.
Yeah. It's an incredible scene. I mean, the scene itself lasts a couple of minutes. That's it. It's 2 minutes of the movie. 2 minutes from 97 minutes. But it's a scene that's just very visceral. And I believe, when he falls on all fours, his back mutates. You get to see the bones cracking and rearranging themselves. And I believe, they were using like airlines of the rams, like converging like a plywood board or something. And just like very subtle transforming effects. Small bladders, I think, were included like within like overlapping layers beneath the skin. Apparently that was like the most complex puppet of the entire sequence. And I think there was 10 or more crew members just to operate it, to make sure it was coordinated correctly.
I don't know about yourself, but every time I see that scene, even now, I get goosebumps. When it first starts and he starts screaming, yelling out.
Oh, I'm burning up, I'm burning, and he rips his t-shirt off.
Yeah. I get goosebumps all over me.
Yeah, I get, Rick Baker's effects, and David Norton just sells it so goddamn well. Obviously, when we see the head transform, it's obviously an animatronic they use for that moment, but it just looks so goddamn good. It's so realistic, it's so fantastic. And obviously getting to see his hands grow, his hands extend as well.
Oh yeah, that scene is done so well.
Which is the very first moment, actually. That's the first part of the transformation. And then obviously we see the hairs, which obviously was done in reverse, I believe. Where we see the hairs coming out, and when he falls on all fours, his back mutates and all that. There was so much work, so many people that were actually required to actually pull that off as well. It's just a fantastic sequence. But obviously the build up to that as well, because obviously he's attacked by this werewolf. And he's visited by his friend. One of the big components of the film that I really enjoy, actually, is Griffin Dunne showing up. The undead Griffin Dunne showing up. He's telling him that you're going to become a werewolf. You must kill yourself. Doesn't David actually call him? I'm not going to be. What is it? I'm not going to be told by Meatloaf.
Yeah, I'm not going to be told by Meatloaf. But those scenes where he does turn up, even though it's like, horrific to see him in decomposing makeup, I think it's 2 or 3 times he turns up. The comedy is so well written.
Yeah.
He's on about, the first time he shows up, he's on about that girl, Debbie Klein, who was trying to bed when he was younger.
Yeah.
And it's just so off the wall. You sit, you're watching it, you're thinking, what am I watching? Am I watching a horror film? Am I watching a comedy film? Am I watching a romantic film?
Well, there's a joke about the Alamo, isn't there?
About
the Alamo in the pub. But yeah, I like when he shows it because obviously he becomes more decomposed as the film goes on. And obviously, I think it actually took 6 hours. I'm pretty certain it was 6 hours to apply the makeup to Griffin Dunne. You know, again, it's great makeup by Rick Baker. And obviously at the end of the film, in the porno theatre, which is just great, it's got one of my favourite comedic moments of the entire film. Obviously they were using, I believe, like a kind of an animatronic for that, and obviously using Griffin Dunne's voice.
That's right, yeah. He actually was using the puppet, doing the puppet himself. Griffin Dunne was actually doing the puppet, and then obviously talking over, you know, the mouth movements.
Yeah.
And that.
Did you know that the red puffer jacket that David Norton actually wore was kind of a slight little nod to Little Red Riding Hood?
No, I always got from it like astronauts type.
Well, there is that component as well, actually, because basically, I believe John Landis actually wanted them to feel like basically fish out of water. They're completely out. They're Americans, and obviously they're going to stand out in the Yorkshire moors. You know, walking into a pub middle of nowhere and all. So yeah, basically, kind of whole fish out of water. And they've actually got Griffin Dunne and David Norton have actually kept them jackets. They've actually still got them puffer jackets.
Really?
They've actually kept from the film.
I bet they're worth quite a bit of money now.
Yeah. So yeah, I love the chemistry between them two. You know, and obviously there's actually now this film had to be to try and keep an R rating. There were certain things that had to be cut, removed. The shower scene, the sex scene, was actually trimmed.
That's right, yeah.
Not, you know, to not run the risk of going beyond the R rating, and also the 3 homeless people that are actually killed in the film. Now, we were actually going to get to see their deaths originally, and John Landis removed it to, you know, again, to avoid any kind of censorship issues, but he actually regrets it now. Rick Baker has actually regretted doing that.
Yeah, apparently they were really gory scenes. What happened was he did film them, and they showed them at a test preview in America. I think it was Chicago.
Yeah.
And then they were done so well. John Landis said they were done so well, these effects, that the people watching the film ended up talking for about 5 minutes after. So John Landis wasn't happy with that, because while they were talking, you know, the film was still going on, and John Landis got a bit frustrated. So, you know, along with the obviously cutting stuff for, you know, the censors, he ended up removing all the death scenes from that.
Yeah. And that's the thing, actually. The werewolf in this movie, when we actually get like the first full glimpse of it, I believe that Rick Baker actually basically took the look of the werewolf was based on his own dog, which is known as, it's a breed called a quiche hound, and it's very kind of wolf-like.
That's right, Bosco, I think his name was.
Yeah, and that's basically where the whole kind of look from. Now, there were actually some disagreements and so forth, difference of opinions, because John Landis and Rick Baker had a different idea of a werewolf in this film. One actually wanted two-legged. His idea of a werewolf was two-legged, running around as, you know, like 1941's The Wolfman, whereas I believe it was John Landis that actually saw a werewolf as it should be bipedal.
Yeah.
And basically to look like a hellhound, you know, a hound that's just come from the pits of hell. And that's essentially what we kind of got. Like you said, you know, some people have said you see too much. I love the look of the werewolf, personally.
I do.
And I love the shots we get of the eyes. There's a shot near the end of the movie, in fact, obviously, where Jenny Agatha's character corners him and she tells him that she loves him. And just, you know, that shot of the wolf, you know, at the end of the alleyway, I just love that shot, just the look of the creature. And, I think that another definite highlight scene for me in the film is where the man's being stalked in the underground.
Personally, I think that's my favourite scene.
Okay.
It's, if you actually take the werewolf element out of that scene, it's shot like it could be like in any slasher film from 1981.
Yeah.
He's getting stalked on the underground. It really does. But then you got the whole scene where that werewolf comes into view at the top of the screen,
Yeah.
when he's lying down on the escalator.
Yeah.
And I think to me, that's the best shot of the film.
I love how it's all done, like the kind of the chase sequence is done POV. Now, we do get a very quick glimpse. As he's up on the escalator, we get a glimpse, don't we, of the wolf at the bottom.
Yeah, and obviously you can see that scene now. You can see more on DVD and Blu-ray than you could actually see back in the VHS days.
Yeah.
But that was a scene that you'd always rewind and try and see if you could see a bit better, right?
Yeah. Just a terrific creation, in my opinion, by Rick Baker. And I think Michael Jackson, actually, not to go too much off topic, Michael Jackson apparently was so bowled over from the effects in this film that obviously Rick Baker was hired for his music video Thriller.
That's right, yeah. And I think Rick Baker will say today, it's all he ever gets asked about. This would be what he's most well known for.
Yeah. And obviously Thriller's one of the best music videos of all time. The music video is just fantastic. With this film as well, certain scenes, there's 4 scenes actually, I believe, where David Norton's character actually has nightmares. The first one we get is very kind of subdued. We get this POV running through the woods, yeah. The second time we see him naked. Now, I read a little fact online that apparently David Norton actually spends around half of the film naked.
Right. Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, time-wise, apparently it's around half of his screen time is actually spent naked. Now, I realise he has a lot of that. I didn't realise it was quite as much as that, but I'm not sure if that's true or not. But the second, obviously, is where he's running through the woods nude, and I believe he kills a deer, doesn't he?
Yeah, he bites on the deer leg, I think. The second one is one I like a lot, is where we see him in the hospital bed in the middle of the woods.
That's the next bit I was going to get to, and that's freaky.
I tell you what, I don't know if you were thinking where I was, but the look of the vampire in that is very much Salem's Lot. I sort of thought the head vampire from Salem's Lot.
Yeah, it's a freak. Yeah, it's a really freaky image actually. It's Jenny Agatha. She sees him, doesn't she? Oh no, sorry, he sees himself. He sees himself lying in the hospital bed. Very surrealistic. It's clearly a nightmare. He's right in the hospital bed in the middle of the woods, and then that it's literally just like 1 second or so, isn't it? A couple of seconds at most. But what a scary image that is.
It's iconic to the film.
And he hated it. David Norton hated that scene because apparently the contact lenses he had to wear, they were really painful to wear.
Oh, God, yeah, I suppose I can imagine back in the day they were bad. Nowadays you could do it all and you wouldn't have much discomfort at all. But he would have, I suppose he would have had to have been blind then, wouldn't he, to put them in?
Now, the fourth one is the one that certainly stands out. And if you're watching it, you think, what the hell? What the hell is going on here? But this is actually a convention that has been actually used in a few werewolf films. Now, this is the first one to do it, I believe. There was such a scene in Silver Bullet, released in 1985, where the werewolf in that film has these very surrealistic nightmares where these people are sat in a church.
Right, I've never seen that film.
They're transforming into wolves. Now, obviously, in this sequence, everything seems normal. David Norton's character's at home, and there's a knock at the door. Somebody keeps knocking at the door. And his dad goes to open the door, and we get these, werewolf Nazis. They're
like Nancy demons, or whatever.
I think they're actually supposed to be werewolves.
Yeah. I think 3 or 4 of them, are supposed to be werewolves.
They come in, they're firing the bullets away, and obviously one of them, who I believe was actually Rick Baker, by the way. Rick Baker was actually dressed up as one of them, and I'm pretty certain it was him that actually had the knife to David Norton's character. I keep forgetting his name. It's Jack, isn't it?
No, Jack is his mate. It's David Kessler.
David Kessler. Yeah, I keep calling him David. I'm like David Norton. Yeah, and obviously, he gets his throat cut. But it's like it's a completely out there kind of moment, isn't it, in the film? That's like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah, and of course, it's the end of that scene as well. It's like a dream in a dream again.
Yeah,
where we get Nurse Alex.
Yeah,
and then she gets killed. But it's totally off the wall. It's totally one of those scenes that just absolutely stands out. You think, does it have a place in this film? But for me, it works really well. And even with the werewolves, or the Nazi demons, or whatever they are, they even look like they got masks on, but it kind of works that way. It works well like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but the whole scene is fantastic. Once you see that scene, you cannot unsee that scene again. It stays with you.
Yeah, so it's a really surrealistic moment. It's just really kind of, excuse my language, kind of batshit crazy. And then, of course, you get that completely unexpected jump scene where obviously he wakes up and, Jenny Agatha goes to the thing and dreaming a dream, which is obviously something that's been recycled and used a lot in horror and that since, but completely unexpected. Completely unexpected when you first watch that. I believe that David Norton actually said that he was really panicking during that scene because they were actually there was a real knife. There was a real knife, and the guy that I'm not sure if it was the guy that actually did the stab, but it was the one that at least held the knife to his throat. They could barely see through the masks. And he was just worried about really being cut during that sequence.
Well, I can see that. That happened quite a lot in these early, 80s and 70s films. A lot of people didn't have the experience. And I think, well, we're going to might come on to it a bit later with what happened with John Landis in The Twilight Zone. Accidents do happen on set, unfortunately, and that's what he was probably worried about.
Yeah. But with this film as well, I think another, this film has some funny moments. One of my favourite moments from a comedic standpoint in this film is where, because I really kind of feel for him, because David tries to do the right thing. He doesn't believe it. You wouldn't believe it. You're a werewolf. Come on, it's crazy, okay? So he starts questioning insanity, doesn't he? Like, seeing his undead friend, should I say, and all that. And, I think there's kind of a moving scene, if you will, where he phones up his family.
Oh yeah, it's quite an emotional scene. That is, he knows basically that he's never going to see his family again.
Yeah,
and he obviously can't come out and tell them that he's a werewolf because he's I think it's his sister on the phone.
Yeah,
to think he's nuts. And it is. It's quite. Again, it's got the whole film. It's got horror elements. It's got emotional.
Yeah.
Love angle. It's done really well.
Yeah, he obviously tells them, doesn't he? He tells his sister to tell his parents that he loves them and that he loves her too. And then he even attempts suicide. He actually puts, I believe he puts the blade to his wrist, doesn't he? He even contemplates it.
That's right, in the phone box. And you've got some wonderful shots of London as well. We got to get that in before the end.
Well, interestingly, this was, as you probably know, obviously the climax of the film Piccadilly Circus. This was the first film in 15 years to actually be allowed to film in Piccadilly Circus.
Yeah, didn't they have trouble? Oh, not so much trouble, but they had to convince the police that they were going to get this scene done, and then all sort of within 5 minutes go back to normal, which apparently they pulled off.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
From what I understand, Landis, I think he invited something like 300 members of the London Metropolitan Police Service to a screening of the Blues Brothers. And the police loved the film so much, they granted production like a 2-night filming permit between 1 o'clock in the morning and 4 a.m.
Oh, I think that's right, yeah. I think that was in Leicester Square, if I remember rightly.
So, traffic was stopped, only 3 times for, 2-minute intervals to, film the automobile stunts, like the double-decker bus. I mean, we get a decapitation near the end, don't we? I think it's the police detective gets his head bitten off, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's a really good scene. And we got to get in the fact that, I don't know what you think about it, but the comedy cop at the start and throughout the film.
Yeah,
I think it's
obviously proves to be pretty inept, doesn't he?
Well, he's like one of the Keystone Cops. It's so hilarious, some of the scenes with him.
Yeah.
And again, it just works. The comedy works.
Did you know John Landis actually makes a cameo at the end?
Yeah, I believe he was the stunt man when he'd done a stunt, didn't he?
Yeah, he was involved. I can't quite remember exactly what happened, but he was involved in a car hitting him or something, or smashing on a car or something. But it's a very blink and you'll miss it moment from John Landis. And interestingly, this is John Landis' favourite film. of all the films he's worked on, he's actually said that this is his personal favourite of the movies that he's actually made. And also just one of the best moments in the film, as I say, from a comedic standpoint, is where David realises he's committed these murders, he's a werewolf, and he needs to be locked up. So he's doing everything he can to be arrested. I'm going to have to be careful what words I use here. I highly doubt Prince Charles is listening or anything. But he obviously is a police officer within earshot, and he shouts, he shouts, "The Queen's a man. Prince William is a, I can't really say the word, Faggot. And he says, Shakespeare talks shit."
That's right. And did you realise, I didn't realise that he uses the CUNT word?
He does. Yeah.
And I've never ever picked up on that before.
Yeah.
So whether on the BBC they cut that, I do not know.
I'd imagine so.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But then I heard that, and again recently, I've watched the film a year or two ago, and I was like, did I really hear that right? And then I had to rewind and go back.
Yeah,
yeah, he does. Yeah,
I just love it. He's just like doing anything in his power. Like, the Queen's a man. I'll say it. Prince Charles is a faggot. Shakespeare talks shit. And then
and all along, while the film is happening, we haven't come on to the scene where the Doctor actually goes back.
Yeah, to the slaughtered lamb. Yeah, we get a line in that. Enough. That was it. That's enough. Enough. Brian Glover comes out because obviously the guy's trying to tell him stuff, isn't he?
Yeah, and I think he starts asking questions in the pub, as you do, and they're all very cagey. And then he goes to go, and then the David Schofield character, I forget his actual name in the film. I'm not even sure he got a name in the film, but he warns him then. He says, David's going to turn into this, werewolf at full moon and that.
But they're like passing him a death sentence, aren't they? When they go into the slaughtered lamb at the beginning, the woman, the barmaid, she's like, we can't let him go. We can't let him. And they're like, and then they hear the Howard like, I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear anything. Nobody asked them to come here. They shouldn't be here, etc. Now, in their defence, they do go out there. All right, admittedly, they're late. They're late, unfortunately, but they do go out there with a gun, don't they? And they do kill the wolf.
Yeah, and they sort of save David's life in a way, which obviously, what happens later. But but they still, for me, they still should have just warned him. Then again, you cross that line, and to where you're thinking, will these American guys think I'm nuts if I tell them there's a werewolf?
Well, you wouldn't have the film, would you? You wouldn't have the movie if they weren't attacked by the werewolf. And I love that whole scene, actually. You're hearing the howls, and they're walking across in the moors. I just love the atmosphere in that whole moment, in that whole scene. And obviously the wolf circling him, and
yeah, you get that false sense of security where David falls.
Yeah.
And then Jack's like, goes to pick him up, and you think everything's going to be okay, and then bang, this werewolf comes out of nowhere.
And did you know that they actually said, like, with Griffin Dunn, Griffin Dunn was a bit rough with the wolf head thing that they used for that moment?
Yeah, didn't he pull off some of the foam?
Yeah. So I can't quite remember. They kind of corrected it and made it harder or something. But yeah, they had to warn him because he was a bit rough with the wolf head that they used for that moment and that.
I think Rick Baker was so pissed off with him after that when they were doing the scene with the werewolf head, going to attack him, I think they redone the scene later or whatever, and he said he was really going for it, Rick Baker, because he was really pissed off with Griffin.
Yeah. And there's also another scene actually that had to be trimmed to avoid a rating above an R, and that was when he says when Griffin Dunn's character actually says about toast. Oh, there's some toast or something, and he was going to eat the toast, and apparently you were going to see the toast fall through his throat as he attempts to eat it.
That's right. I think what happened was like a happy accident. During dinner or lunch that day, Griffin Dunn did eat something and it fell through, and he said, "Oh, we'll use that for the film."
Yeah.
But then it looked too gross, apparently.
Another moment I love, and it's you have to be really careful about putting something like this on screen nowadays. It's how It's the scene in which, obviously, we get the scene where David actually wakes up in the wolf den, which they had to do in one take. You can imagine he was pretty nervous. He was pretty scared about doing that scene, being there right next to wolves. So that scene was done in one take, and he, wakes up, and he actually said about all these extras, he's like, you've hired a lot of extras for like this, and Rick Baker and that actually had to turn around to him and say, no, the zoo's open. These aren't extras. These are real people.
I think they'd done the scene as early as possible, didn't they? And it was actually done in the Queen's backyard, the Windsor Zoo.
Oh, okay, I'm not sure. I'm not surprised about that, though.
No, they've done it. I think they must have done it like the crack of dawn, so they try to keep as many people, away from the scene as possible. But it was quite funny as well, because the scene where Jack actually dies was actually filmed in the back of Windsor Park, where the werewolf, when he's screaming.
Yeah.
And he said it was so funny because he had to do the take so many times, and he was in earshot of pretty much the Queen's residence at the time.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, I love that scene. He goes out the wolves den, and of course, there's the scene where he's hiding in the bush. There's a little kid with balloons. Now, it just obviously, it's not something we can talk about and that, but, a little kid with balloons hearing a voice coming from a bush. Hey, little kid with the balloons, come over here, I'll give you £1. I'll give you £2. And then he goes over there and he comes out and oh man, it's hilarious. It's just hilarious. And then the little kid goes up to his mum. What is it? A naked American man took my balloons.
What I find funny in that scene as well is that the kid's got absolutely zero acting ability whatsoever.
Oh, you can tell he can't keep a straight face when it's ran off. But I just love that whole scene. It's just funny as hell. A little kid and a voice coming from a bush. I mean, we know the guy's not a sexual deviant or whatever, but that little kid doesn't know that.
That's right, and then he runs into the old woman, doesn't he?
Yeah, he takes a coat, and again, from a comedic standpoint, a scene I love is the camera pans along, at the bus stop, and he's stood there wearing a woman's coat, and there's that guy looking at him, and he turns, he's like, lovely, what is it again? Nice weather we've been having here.
Barefooted, yeah.
And he just looks around, the guy's just staring at him, and he's basically just stood there looking like a transvestite, isn't he?
Yeah. So funny.
Yeah, so, this film does the comedy well, but as I said, without being a spoof. It's not a spoof, it's not a parody or anything like that. It is a horror film. It is a horror movie, but it injects humour at the right times.
It's expertly done, really. It's like you say, it is primarily a horror film. The comedy elements are quite a lot, and they just seem to work in every scene. And I think John Landis at the time was just a genius. And obviously what happened later on in his career with the Twilight Zone and stuff like that, which I don't, I've mentioned on you before, I don't condone any of that. I think John Landis was personally wrong. And I think he should have got a prison sentence and all that, But I do think it obviously affected his career, because he really would have gone on to become another Spielberg. He was that good.
I'm not really sure about that. I think John Landis, I've liked most of his films, in all honesty. This is my personal favourite. I do love The Blues Brothers as well. That's very much a cult movie, isn't it? The Blues Brothers.
Yeah.
And obviously, National Lampoons and that. With An American Werewolf in London, it is my personal favourite werewolf movie. As I said, I have a soft spot because I saw it at a young age, so nostalgia certainly plays a part there. But having seen this film many times now, it's a film that I often return to. I really enjoy it. I like the setting. I like the fact, because we're fellow Brits, and you don't get a huge amount of kind of American horror movies set in Britain.
That's right, yeah. And you'd be surprised, I've got, as you have, got quite a few American friends, and a lot of them don't, from what I've, been talking to them and stuff like that, they don't really regard this film as high as obviously we do.
And we got to talk about another scene, right? There's definitely another scene that needs to be talked about. And again, it's kind of like, it's pretty much at the climax of the film, and that's the porn theatre. I love the scene where he's getting to meet his victims.
Oh, yeah, it's so, Griffin Dunne actually it's not actually live in this scene, is it? It's like a puppet.
Yeah, yeah.
It's done as like a corpse of a puppet, but it's so well done, you know. And I like the humor as well when they're like discussing ways for him to die.
Yeah.
And Griffin Dunn says, you know, no, this is actually my mate. You know, I want to do this as least, you know, horrific as we can.
Yeah, I like it when they're throwing all the suggestions. He's like, how thoughtful.
Yeah.
You know, his friend actually, you know, he says to him, because David actually says, how about hanging? He says, no, that would be too painful for you. You'd probably choke to death, you know. So he's still got the friendship, you know. He's still like, he's looking out for him still. Yes, he wants to take him, you know, he wants him to take his life, but he doesn't want him to suffer whilst doing so. But the line that I really love, I mean, I especially like that very English woman there who says, what is it? Oh, just put a gun to your head and pull the trigger.
Yeah, like the yuppie couple, wasn't it?
Yeah,
like,
and of course,
upper class
the
couple.
guy that he kills on the underground, you know, the guy that says, oh, this is just your friend here. What is it again? Where I am a victim of your carnivorous activities. Your lunar carnivorous activities, sorry.
I think that's a great line.
Yeah.
Great.
He goes, we weren't sure if you want to see him in that because, you know, he's a bit messy and stuff. He says, yes, I do look most unpleasant. This is your friend.
It's so inventive, isn't it, that scene?
Yeah.
It's so inventive.
I am a victim of your lunar carnivorous activities. I just love that. It's just how he talks. It's that pure British accent, you know, the yuppie. And do you know what scares me also in this film as well, which isn't actually horror? How cheap taxis were back then and how cheap a cinema ticket were.
Yeah, it's like £2.80 or something.
I think he pays £1.50 for the taxi ride. Now, admittedly, I don't know how far he's travelled, but I'm like, Jesus Christ, you'd be spending at least a £5 nowadays for that.
Oh, yeah.
You've got to love inflation.
I think with the, you know, coming on to the actual porn, you know, the fake porno film as well, in the original screenplay, they wanted to do it because this porno theatre, 11 years later, apparently earlier, was like a cartoon theatre.
Okay.
And they wanted to have the cartoon violence.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean, instead of the fake porno film.
Okay.
But yeah, that's funny in itself, the fake porno film, and you've got the guy, you know.
Walking in, he's talking to... Like, he's actually talking to her, but the guy thinks he's talking to him, and then it turns out he's actually in the wrong place altogether.
That's right.
It's like, like I thought, what was it again? He says, like, I thought you said you would do this again, or something like that.
And he says, oh, something like, he ends up anyway. He says, okay, and walks out the scene.
So it's just like a case of mistaken identity. He's walking into this sex act going on, and you presume it's basically his wife or whatever that's cheating on him, and then it turns out he's not even talking to the right people.
And he says something like, I've never seen this guy before in my life.
Yes,
okay.
It's something like that. Yeah, that may very well be it.
And she was a well-known porn actress, Lindsay Drew. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, she's done quite a lot. She was, at the time, I think she was like the most famous British porn actress.
Okay. But yeah, Jenny Agatha, let's quickly talk about these two because... yeah, I mean, obviously, she invites him, doesn't she, back to, you know, stay with him, and she basically tells him that she's not in the habit of bringing home stray American men. You know, it's not long before, you know, they get it on and that. Now, the question is here, because obviously she's instantly attracted to him, isn't she? That's obvious right from the hospital.
Yeah, you can see the sort of, then they end up starting flirting, don't they, in the hospital.
The question is she more attracted to him? Is it because there's an animalistic nature to him now? That subconsciously, or is it... Because that's the thing, he's obviously, you know, he's becoming a werewolf, we all know that. Do you think subconsciously there's an animalistic attraction there? Because obviously, as you know, his sex drive goes up, doesn't it?
Yeah, and funny you say that, because there's a scene where she says something, you know, he's basically just woken up... just come in from, like you said, he was reading a book, and the next thing you know, he woke up in the zoo. He comes back to the apartment, obviously, and then she acts as if that's just normal. Yeah. So you might be on the right line there. Maybe she's...
I just kind of thought that, maybe there's kind of an animalistic, you know, thing there in that. Because obviously, as well, it's like he you know, prior to the transformation, he actually... can't seem to get an appetite, can he? When he's round her flat.
That's right,
Well, he's going to the fridge, he just can't get any appetite, he can't get hungry and all that. And there's a scene, isn't there? Obviously, there's a little dog barking at him as well.
That's right, with the two little girls.
Why are them little girls laughing like that, by the way? That was kind of like, they're like laughing hysterically.
Yeah, it makes no sense, that scene
I always found that a little weird, like why they're laughing at him so much. And then there's a cat, isn't there, that actually hisses at him.
Yeah, well, he's trying to break back into the flat. We get like a montage as well where he's just bored out of his skull.
Yeah.
He just don't know what to do with himself.
Well, I actually read that the cat hissing at him, how they got that was they basically put another cat in front of that cat.
Right, yeah.
It was cut in a way that obviously you can't see, but there was another cat placed in front of the cat, and that's how they got the reaction from the cat for that scene.
Yeah, I can see that.
You know, and an American, you know, as well, I don't want to go too much off topic, but I'm not sure if you do, but I collect Nika, but later this year, they're releasing a Nika, the Werewolf, and the Werewolf Nazi figures this year.
Right, it's something I've never got into. Obviously, money-wise, I collect quite a lot of Blu-rays and stuff now, so it's something I'm glad I don't like, you know. But yeah, that seems awesome.
It's expensive being a geek. It's a very expensive hobby being a complete and utter geek. I do like the look of them. I might have to get them. I did used to have a werewolf bust from the 81 American Werewolf in London that regretfully I sold it a few years back, and it's one of them things that has skyrocketed in price now. And I'm really annoyed. I'm really annoyed at myself for letting it go. Just desperately needed the money at the time. But yeah, an American Werewolf in London, I think it is very much, I'd say, probably a horror classic. It's certainly, I mean, is it your favourite werewolf film of all time, would you say?
I would say easily. Easily. I'd say second to that, obviously, would be the Howling. I do like Wolfen, but it's a different type of, werewolf film. But yeah, I would say easily my favourite.
Yeah. And I mean, it's obviously a film, like I said, it was a commercial. It was a commercial and critical success. This film did really well. And, it's proved to be pretty influential, I'd say. Even though werewolf films actually existed for many, many years before it, this is the one that was really groundbreaking, I feel. In terms of its effects, its SFX, I think this has got some of Rick Baker's very best work.
I think so. I think in terms of like back, you go back in the time of 1981, you got to take that into consideration. There was nothing ever done remotely like this. I know we had The Thing a year later, which was fantastic. The effects in that are fantastic. Nothing was ever done remotely like this, up until this time. Yeah.
And the 80s was certainly a decade for great practical effects, as you say, with the likes of Rick Baker there, Rob Bottin. There is another film that I want to do for a future podcast as well that is very much, it's a film that I mentioned earlier. It's a movie that really does, it's an 80s film, but it very much kind of harks back to the golden age of horror. And I would like to cover Fright Night at some point.
Oh, yeah. One of my favourites, actually.
Fright Night may be my favourite 80s vampire film. It may be my personal favourite.
In terms of vampire films, for me, I would put it up there. It possibly be my favourite, but then you've got Lost Boys, which I like a lot.
Yeah.
But in terms of 80s vampire films, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I love that film.
Of course, An American Werewolf in London, many years later, we got a film called An American Werewolf in Paris, which was released in 1997. I don't really feel like it's worth talking about. I don't like it. I don't hate it. It's not like one of the worst films ever made or anything like that. I do remember the CG, even for its time, being pretty damn bad.
That's one I've never seen, and I've heard so many bad things about it. I think I would be curious to see it, maybe in future.
It's just the CG's just awful. It's just, now, look, it was 97, so CG was still kind of in a way in its infancy. This isn't a film that had the budget of something like Jurassic Park, which had absolutely fantastic CG for its time. But even then, the CG is very detracting and very jarring for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just not a very good film. There's no connection. There's no connection whatsoever to An American Werewolf in London. But as I said, with a pub with the slaughtered lamb, I just love the opening to it. the song, seeing the Moors, obviously them arriving at the slaughtered lamb, and obviously they're on a different planet almost.
Yeah,
it's like you getting back, to the astronaut kind of, the puffer jackets and that. And it really sets up the film well. And Brian Glover, getting back to him, because obviously he's there playing chess with Rick Mayall. They did star alongside each other in an episode of Bottom.
Right, yeah. I totally forgot about that, but now you've mentioned it, I remember now.
He was the, not the gas man, he was the episode was called The Gas Man, but he was the neighbour that was trying to get it on with his missus. And I believe, from what I recall, they ended up... the characters' names are actually escaping me at the moment. Rick and... I can't remember.
Dave Edmonton, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and they end up jeopardising. I think they end up falling through the ceiling or whatever. But they were actually alongside each other in that as well. And this is kind of weird as well because, in this film, Rick Mayall, may rest in peace, great comedy actor. Absolutely loved Rick Mayall for, like, The Young Ones and especially Bottom. And obviously seeing him in a subdued role in something.
Yeah,
because I think he only has, a couple of lines in this film? I think
that's right. Yeah, he looks really young as well, doesn't he?
He does. I'm sure we've all seen Drop Dead Fred.
Yeah. People. If any of the American listeners are listening, and you could do better than watching stuff like the old episodes of The Young Ones. Rick Mayall was an absolute god in the UK comedy god.
Rick Mayall was a great comedy actor. He did. Pervy, sleazy to an absolute T. His character in Bottom is just he plays that character to absolute perfection, doesn't he?
Yeah, and sadly you never get the likes of programs like that ever again, really.
Yeah. But yeah, I believe there were other scenes of improv in the film and that as well. I think there was a line later on in the film where David actually says he feels like an athlete, he's never felt better. I believe that was improv. That wasn't actually in the original script either.
That's similar to like The Fly. If you notice when the transformation in The Fly before he transforms.
Oh yeah, that's true.
He says he's got superhuman strength, he feels great.
Yeah, but both films as well have something in common, I guess. At the core, they're kind of a love story, if you will.
Yeah, and a transformation scene as well, yeah.
Yeah. So, I think that's pretty much... I think we've covered most things we really wanted to talk about in this film, didn't we, Darren?
Yeah, I've got everything covered. Yeah, I've really enjoyed doing this episode. Like I say, it's been a labour of love for me again, this one.
Yeah. American Werewolf in London, great film, fantastic effects... And probably my personal favourite, probably my favourite John Landis film, and probably my favourite werewolf movie. I still love 1941's The Wolfman, which is the granddaddy of werewolf films. Ironically, I'm not sure if you know this, Darren, but in The Wolfman, such an iconic movie in that, but did you know you never see a full moon in that film?
No, I've only ever seen the film once.
Okay.
And Universal, they're either hit or miss with me, really. I find them a bit slow.
Oh,
I know. It's not my thing. If that makes sense.
Well, I tell you what, Darren, it has been an absolute pleasure knowing you. It really has. Hit me up in the future at some point. Yeah, we'll I'm only kidding, man.
But I do like, funny enough, old style black and white films. I'm not saying I dislike them, but I just find some of the Universal early stuff a little bit slow. I have seen it. I did enjoy The Wolfman for what it is.
I'm a massive fan of the Universal monster movies as well. It's like the golden age of horror. We wouldn't have horror as it is, if it wasn't for them movies. Frankenstein, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Dracula, just some of my favourites. But that's it for today's podcast anyway. So thanks a lot to everyone that listened. And we will be back again soon to haunt you and torment you. And take care. And hopefully this podcast has been a howling success.
Take care, and I'll see you all again soon.
Adios for now.